Secondly, I will point out the ICOM Red List, which are internationally recognized as an efficient tool to fight the illicit trafficking of cultural goods. Such tools prepared and provided by museum professionals are the perfect example of how the international museum community can play an efficient role for its partners in the fight against illicit trafficking of cultural property. Since 2000, ICOM published 17 red lists, and among them the red list for Afghanistan, Egypt, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and West Africa. We are currently preparing a red list that will be dedicated to the Southeast Europe region. These lists are constructed around the identification of categories of objects by countries or region which are protected by legislation, while being in demand on the art and antiquities market. It is important to underline that the objects presented are not stolen. These objects have been chosen by our national experts from the collections of renowned museum institutions to illustrate which kind of objects are in demand on the market and thus vulnerable and at risk of being illicitly trafficked. The ICOM Red List aims to help law enforcement officials, such as police and custom officers, through the world to recognize objects that could be illegally crossing borders or on sale online or through auction houses or antiquities dealers. The list have proven successful in the past as well as recently, and in general in combination with other tools. Indeed, the key word to combat illicit traffic is cooperation. To strengthen this, ICOM works alongside with its partners, organizations such as UNESCO, UNIDROIT, Interpol, or the World Customs Organization to develop operational resources, capacity building, and awareness-raising activities. Of course, during the last month, the COVID-19 crisis has had and still has a huge impact on our project and the way we work. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we proposed specific solutions that could effectively respond to the multiple issues faced by cultural institutions around the world. Drawing on our network of experts, we drafted recommendations on museum security, preventive conservation, digital outreach, and safely reopening after the crisis. These recommendations, drafted together with our expert committees and partners, such as Interpol, are available on our website and are being used by museums and governments as a standard reference. During the lockdown, we also offer assistance in the field to some of our West and Central African national committees to finance, thanks to ALIF Foundation, operational and capacity building projects in museums in their countries. These programs are currently ongoing and will focus on inventories, data collection, digitization, and security. But in order to maximize the effectiveness of the emergency action we are taking, there is a need to develop preventive measures, such as carrying out the necessary digitization of collections and inventories, which must be matched by adequate public investment. Digitization is crucial for the protection and promotion of cultural heritage, promoting co-creation and empowering communities. ICOM Committee CDOC is specifically working on this question. Those preventive measures and actions in case of emergency are tangible examples of the support that ICOM can give to accompany. Sorry, I had a problem on my computer. To accompany museum in heritage protection. With the continuous emergency situation we are facing and the circumstance created by the pandemic, ICOM accentuated even more its international cooperation during the last months. As an example, I can share that ALIF, together with ICOMOS, have been important allies after the blast that struck Beirut at the beginning of August. Together with ICOM Lebanon and our experts from the Disaster Risk Management Committees, we put in place our emergency management protocol and sent 2 missions in Beirut, one immediately after the explosion for the need assessment, and one in September. With the help of our partners, ICOM has assisted Lebanese museums in responding to the most urgent needs and safeguarding the collection and buildings. Another example is the current situation in Nagorno-Karabakh region. As soon as we received information about some destruction suffered by museum and cultural heritage sites in this region, ICOM took position and strongly condemned the targeting of cultural heritage as a weapon of war. Thanks to the information received from the 2 national committees, ICOM Armenia and ICOM Azerbaijan, such international call was possible and necessary to also remind both parties their obligation under the 1954 Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. 3 days ago, ICOM, together with ICOMOS, ICA, and IFLA, again called upon all parties involved in implementing the complete ceasefire agreement that came into force on the 10th of November to proactively ensure full respect and protection of all cultural heritage in the concerned areas, in particular those where control is passing from one party to the other. We are currently working with both ICOM National Committee as well as with international partners to bring operational assistance to cultural institutions of the region. To conclude, it is important to stress that all these heritage protection efforts must, of course, fall within a long-term horizon that goes beyond the emergency itself. Our museums and their collections must be preserved, not only in their materiality, but also in their ability to produce value for local population and addressing increasingly urgent challenges like sustainability. As a trusted source of knowledge, cultural institutions are uniquely placed to engage with communities in promoting dialogue and respect, and to actively help achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you also for respecting the time and for stressing the importance of 2 keywords, I would say, digitization and long-term horizon, which are both very, very important. Before giving the floor to Sara, let me, because I understand there's been probably an overlapping with a previous event, and so maybe the audience lost the introduction. I wouldn't want to repeat what I said as the introduction, but just let me thank once again the RO Museum Exhibition for hosting this roundtable, which has been organized by the Foundation Sant'Agata per l'Economia della Cultura. And let me remind that this also goes within the frame of the International Master in Cultural Property Protection in Crisis Responses, which is, as I said before, devoted to this kind of problems. Now, the second panelist is Sara Abram, who comes from a different field of experience. She's currently Secretary General of the Foundation Centro, Conservazione, Restauro, la Venaria, Reale. I think that she will be talking about the multidisciplinary approach to both conservation and the links between research, conservation, and training. I try to give you the floor, Sara.
Grazie, grazie professore, ringrazio prima di tutto anche
Thank you, Professor. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the Sant'Agata Foundation for putting together this meeting, and Alessio in particular. It's a pleasure and indeed an honor for me to take part into this debate with colleagues and the institutions, because we work in the world of conservation, of the world heritage. Of course, we see you with great admiration, and well, thank you so much for the work you do, especially after what happens after the crisis. So my question was, how can I give a positive contribution to our conversation? So what is the perspective that I should be using here? So what can I find, in our organizations to share with you? Okay, just give me 1 second to share the slides. Okay, I hope you can see my PowerPoint slides. Now, this is the Centro, Conservazione, Restauro, CCR Foundation in Venaria. Now, the foundation was created back in 2005, so 15 years ago. And we knew what restoration works were. So that was an absolute scientific discipline. This is what the restoration was considered, 15 years ago. And this is the reason why it was possible to focus on complexity. So doing this was one of the opportunities I think we should be talking about in this roundtable, because complexity is one of the distinctive elements in terms of restoration and conservation interventions. Now, when you have to do this, you have to have scientific skills, which is based on scientific research and diagnostics, plus, if you will, humanities-related skills, because this is based on the possibility you have to document, the works. So you really have to know the history, but also the cultural background of that work. And then the real, actual, physical, intervention is based on a very deep and wide specialization. So the restoration work is basically split between different specialists. So you have canvases, you have the wooden sculptures, and then you have, once again, wooden artifacts. You also have tapestry, you also have leather-made products. You also have metal, ceramics, glass-made products, paper, photography. You also have the CA, so the contemporary art. Now, I just went through this very quick, overview of branches or sectors, because this is what we try and do every single day, when it comes to, implementing our efforts. So what we want to do is to offer a very high level of specialization and skills, which is absolutely necessary in this field on one side. On the other side, you have to implement a very complex, highly integrated perspective, because, all the works we do and all the projects we manage are based on conservation. And it goes without saying that all of this has a major impact. Of course, we also have a specific, scientific research basis. We also have one main target. So we have to transfer all of this knowledge into education. Now, we do education thanks to a specific university course. In this case, in our city, Venaria, Reale, this is done together with the local Turin University. But we also have many other projects having to do with education of the so-called heritage professionals. We do this in different systems and at different levels. Okay, so this is the kind of, let's say, assets we can count on. Well, in my opinion, these assets are based on a deep methodology. By this, I mean that we want to really understand the conservation problem. We know it is made up of so many ingredients and components. Now, just some days ago, we took into account a very significant example, and this was very important for us because we totally capsized. We totally changed our perspective. We've taken care of very specific research projects from the training or education perspective. I don't know if you know this project. This is already been published online, and all of the meetings have been funded by the Megati Foundation. Once again, the main objective, of this, perspective is to create new knowledge, new technical, new specific skills. All of this has to be shared with the technical scientific community in Venaria Reale, thanks to some specific, highly dedicated training courses. Okay, let me get into the thick of what we did in Venaria Reale, just to go back to the main subject of this roundtable. Well, To do so, I'm sharing with you some, key moments, if you will, or events that we had to take into account in our center, together with some of our colleagues from the restoration lab. Well, it's an example of a crisis, and I'm going to talk about the risk and the context-specific criticalities. Now, I'm mentioning a couple of earthquakes that we had, very strong earthquakes that we have had in Italy. Well, these two earthquakes have been, if you will, the opportunity for us to do something very complex. 8 years ago, 2012, the earthquake in Emilia, so in northern Italy. Now, our foundation is quite young. I mean, we've been incorporated in 2005, as I said before. So that was the first time we could, get in touch with some specific high-skilled operating units in order to manage post-earthquake situations. So an earthquake is one of such situations. So once again, we decided to cooperate with a specific center based in Sassuolo, not far from Bologna, in northern Italy. We started working with our students. We have collected resources. Once again, we decided all together to try and, solve this emergency. Of course, the so-called collection or information collection center told us what to do, just like a priority list. So the project consisted into, doing different things at the same time. First of all, protecting the heritage, then, doing conservation of the heritage. And the third element was to enhance the value of the heritage. So we've been there to give support and help. And then, all the way to the final, if you will, result or outcome. So once again, we have, done conservation and restoration of these works and paintings and statues. And then after all of this, we have basically created an exhibition so that people could go back to, let's say, and enjoy, all of the restored masterpieces. So there's been another earthquake in central Italy in 2016 in Umbria and Marche, so in two regions in central Italy. So here we have worked with the Spoleto-based collection center, together with some of the, heritage-related associations, depending on the Italian government. Once again, we wanted to know more about what was happening in those regions, and we did so by offering training. So once again, the complex context in which we work now, and once again, this includes something which is very specific. We're now working in the Santo Sepolcro Basilica. We're now working there. There's a new project going on there. And this project has to do with the restoration of the flooring. So together with the, replacement and conservation of the floor, we have many other, same time complex operations, including, for example, archaeological diggings. Now, this is done by the La Sapienza University in Rome. We also have to have some static works in order to verify, the staticity of one of the buildings of this Santo Sepolcro Basilica, and we also have to update many other, systems. So many different objectives, but at the same time, even the context is extremely complex. Now, because this is so complex, so we have to have very specific, operational activities, and even the types of works we do are really very special. Once again, we want to comply with the uniqueness of this historical, religious, cultural complex that we are working in right now. This means that we have to keep talking with the local religious communities that, of course, do encounter and meet inside, this church. Maybe the most difficult thing is that we have to comply with different layers of the so-called stratification. We have different materials, but also different cultures. This context, once again, is so complex, so top caution is required. Now, of course, we can do all of this. We can carry out all of these actions without ever, if you will, interrupting, the flow of, persons inside the church. So once again, we comply with the opening hours of this basilica. Now, this is a different field of action that we are, keeping an eye on right now. It generates plenty of exchanges of views and cooperation. We have a cooperation agreement with the Rio de Janeiro University after the fire that has destroyed the National Museum. Now, this is what we can do for them. So we would like to give a helping hand to our friends in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And we did so together with the local museum operators. So first of all, we carried out a context analysis. We have exchanged plenty of, competencies and skills on capacity building. We have offered our own skills and our own equipment. We put together a co-design, co-planning system of all what necessary to do in this museum. So we have exchanged different skills, different perspectives, but also different visions on how to enhance the heritage of this building. And before starting the real conservation work. Now, last but not least, I'd like to draw your attention on one of the needs or unmet needs we feel we have in terms of complexity. We would like to involve young generations represented by young professionals. We can do this with a forum, the YPF, which is the Young Professional Forums. This is what we do together with some international organizations. We have, introduced, YPF last year, and we are receiving so many applications, from very, very young professionals coming from the four corners of the world. Well, I think this is a crucial lever, and we need to leverage on them because this is good for us to do a sort of a comparison between different approaches. We will be generating strategies in order to participate in international cooperation agreements. Thank you so much for your attention. Don't hesitate to come back to me if you want to receive further insights. Thank you.
Thank you for stressing the combination between conservation research and education, and also for mentioning the example of the Rio fire and the importance of capacity building for risk management of cultural heritage, which I think is the focus of our next speaker, who is Rohit Jigysu, project manager on urban heritage, climate change, and disaster risk at ICCROM. ICCROM, as we certainly know, is the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, which is devoted to this kind of issues. And I feel that Rohit's intervention will focus on the initiatives by ICCROM on the capacity building for risk management of cultural heritage. I give you the floor, Rohit.
I would be presenting on the title that I have given to my brief talk is on multi-hazard approach, managing risks to heritage, and COVID-19 pandemic and how we can learn from it and go beyond it. Well, we all know that COVID-19 has brought forward one important point for us, that we are in a very uncertain future. It is one black swan event, which is very unlikely to happen, but has many severe consequences, as we are witnessing right now. Well, heritage is impacted, as we have seen here in Italy, but also in other parts of the world, how cultural heritage sites and museums are suddenly, they are devoid of visitors, and many of them are abandoned, and that they are losing business in many ways as well as the communities around them. So while COVID-19 pandemic is going on, we are also having other disasters, as we have been hearing about the earthquake in Croatia, which in May this year kind of caused a lot of damage, but it was certainly a challenge to really respond in this situation when there was already a limitation due to COVID-19. Similarly, a cyclone in Bangladesh and India, again earlier this year during the pandemic times, has been a huge challenge. What we see is that the impact of COVID-19 on cultural institutions has ranged from the health and safety considerations, to lack of financial resources because of loss of revenues, overstretched institutions because they're already so much engaged in responding to the pandemic, and definitely the occurrence of multiple events, as I just explained to you. So, and also, of course, we have very little, less human resources available because the staff is not able to be there in full capacity. So what we really see is that this pandemic situation has really brought forward the issue that disasters are actually collaborating with each other. And we need to have this multi-hazard approach where we look at climate-related disasters and larger climate change, conflict-related issues, and also the economic considerations. So we need to kind of look at disasters in a much more complex manner rather than just focusing either on pandemic or on earthquake or fire or such hazards in isolation. So heritage management with risk lens in times of uncertainty is something we definitely need a lot of focus, where we have to think about mitigation preparedness as well as adaptation. I already emphasized the importance of multi-hazard approach, and definitely thinking about building back better in the sense that we reduce vulnerabilities and build resilience for the future events that are likely to happen. Now, we know disaster risk management is about what you do for prevention, mitigation, for before a disaster, what you need to do for emergency response or first aid during, and of course recovery and reconstruction following disaster. But this COVID-19 pandemic has really given a new lens for us to look at all these different stages with a new perspective because of the kind of lessons that we are learning with this pandemic at the moment. Now, what are those new considerations for disaster risk management of cultural heritage? First is definitely use of digital mediums for remote monitoring of heritage sites and institutions, especially when they are closed and the staff cannot be there or is in very limited capacity. We need to think about procedures for closing and opening of sites and institutions in such extraordinary situations. And also procedures for cleaning and maintenance of heritage sites, and reconfiguring visitor management in these situations, redefining the security system for heritage sites and institutions. And also in some instances, there have been need for guidelines for temporary use of these sites and institutions as quarantine shelters or as storage areas. And definitely a redefined response protocol and evacuation procedures. For example, in case of a cyclone that hit Bangladesh, they could not use those cyclone shelters as they would use in the normal situation because of the limitation in the number of people in a certain cyclone shelter. So COVID-19 has taught us basically that we have to think about three different situations. Before a lockdown period, when you have to prepare yourself for the closure of your site and institution, and how do you really prepare those spaces for providing aid to affected populations. Situation two is during lockdown period, when the heritage site and institution is actually closed, and in some cases is also used as a testing center for the crisis management activities. And situation three is about the post-lockdown period, and when you actually have to start preparing your site or institution to reopen. So ICCROM has, as was mentioned by the honorable moderator, has been really putting its effort in building capacities and preparing guidelines and bringing together lessons from different countries to address these different procedures. And so we have come up with a bunch of resources on our website. We have a special page which we set up just a few days, few weeks after the pandemic actually got started, and it is being regularly updated, and you can find tips and resources, featured stories, relevant links, and you can also get in touch with the experts through ICCROM's own roster. So these are the different tools and tips and resources that we have come up with, from safety of personnel to tools for identifying risks, monitoring impacts, first aid to collections, ensuring business continuity, how to support artists and craftspersons, and post-crisis recovery. There is a template that has also been now adapted and translated into various languages on how to identify risks and monitor impacts, and as well as assess needs for immovable, movable, and intangible heritage. We have also been doing a couple of lecture series, as you can see from here, which is dedicated to COVID-19 and the heritage management or heritage challenges for heritage management due to this pandemic, and how to learn from there. As you know, ICCROM has one of its very major flagship program, which is really catering to the need of cultural first aiders. And in that sense, it has been collaborating with several cultural institutions, including the ones in Italy. We have been working very strongly with Carabinieri, and also with the Institute for Cultural Heritage Restoration in Italy, on several aspects of on giving first aid to cultural heritage. And again, we are looking at all these procedures and capacity building activities by factoring in COVID-19 as another additional element based on the lessons that we have learned, and going ahead with the first aid action framework that we at ICCROM have developed. Which also involves kind of connecting to different kinds of actors, from civic defense organizations like army, police. We have been actively involved in several disaster situations, from the ones in Italy to in Nepal, Haiti, and in those situations we have been working with all these different local actors, stakeholders, starting from communities up to institutions, on developing their skills and capacities on responding to cultural heritage in crisis situations. And now I'm just closing my talk by saying that we cannot just restrict ourselves to the crisis situation. Yes, we are going through it. We have to now think about the post-COVID world. What are those lessons that we have to learn for reducing such risks in the future and preparing well for that? And that brings me to these special series that ICCROM is now launched, which talks about the how heritage and resilience work together, the relationship between cultural heritage and well-being and sustainability. And we have been carrying on with several lectures, dialogues, webinars to advance thinking on heritage management in post-COVID world. ICCROM is also in cooperation with IUCN, is also under World Heritage Leadership Program, is now revising its the manual on managing disaster risks for World Heritage, with a new place-based approach for disaster risk management, which connects people, nature, and culture, because these three are really interlinked and have to be considered. And very importantly, as I mentioned earlier, we are including biohazards in our updated version of the manual, again basing on all the lessons that we are learning from this pandemic situation. And last but not the least, really thinking about climate change impacts on disasters, and that is also an additional element. So just to conclude, this is one of the capacity building initiative that we are launching. We are also venturing into online teaching like many other institutions, and working on developing this course, understanding people, nature, culture, heritage management for building resilience of living traditional settlements, and another regional course on cultural heritage first aid, peace and resilience in times of crisis, which we are launching. It's being supported also by Alif Foundation, and we are also kind of going to launch it next year, early next year. So we at ICCROM continue to really learn from these lessons and advance thinking in capacity building and knowledge dissemination in this important area of risk management. Thank you very much.
called a multi-hazard approach. And thank you for stressing the importance of before, during, and after the crisis. And now let's turn to a totally different, probably approach by somebody who plays an important role in the field of logistics and transportation of artworks, someone who represents a company which is a leader in the Italian art market and art world. It's the turn of Antonio Addari, who is the managing director of Arterìa, as I said, one of the leading companies in this field. I feel Antonio will provide us some insight on the activity following and preceding a natural disaster and emergency situation, and from the viewpoint of the precise logistic organization. And I feel that the presentation will be in Italian. Prego, Dottor Addari.
Sembra che Addari non sia collegato, è offline. Non so se i tecnici possono aiutarci, se l'assistenza tecnica ci può aiutare, perché lo vedo ma non riesco a raggiungerlo, non riesco a sentirlo, sembra che sia offline. Contributo molto breve dal punto di vista della mia esperienza professionale.
Sector and which takes on different contents in different fields of application. The definition that I find most suitable in the context of cultural heritage at risk for logistics is that of the Society of Logistic Engineers, which defines logistics as the art and science of organization, design, technical activity concerning the requirements, definition, supply, and the resources necessary to support targets, plans, and cooperation. I stress support targets. This is what logistics is doing. This definition introduced the need of a precise logistical organization for achieving an important goal, such as securing cultural assets following a natural disaster or any other emergency situation. In fact, in any emergency situation, speed, and precision are essential to the success of the intervention. And this leads to another assumption. There is no space for improvisation, but planning and programming are fundamental. And these are, in fact, the two main concepts in logistics, planning and programming. Trying to deepen the study of logistics of protecting and saving cultural heritage, I found many similarities in the concept, not on the operational aspects, with what is defined humanitarian logistics. That is the logistic for intervention in the event of a disaster and saving of population. In our case, it's a question of securing cultural heritage. Certainly, we will not need food or medicines, but the planning, the methods of intervention are very similar. In both cases, humanitarian logistics and logistics for protecting cultural heritage, it's very important to have intervention plans ready to make operation fast and precise. And this is what is called disaster planning. The Fritz Institute made some studies years ago on humanitarian logistics that have highlighted a lack of recognition of the importance, maybe even centrality, of logistics for the achievement of such important goal. In our case, for the protecting the cultural heritage. And I feel that we have a similar situation with regards of logistics in our case than logistics for humanitarian. To summarize, the logistics for the protection and recovery of artistic assets refers to the processes and systems involved in the mobilization of people, resources, means, and knowledge of the safety and cultural assets affected by natural disaster or other emergencies. The main activities to be taken care of by the logistics in our case are procurement, transport with relative protective packaging, monitoring and traceability, customs clearance, and storage. I would like now to talk briefly, this is the second part of my contribution, about what is called disaster planning and logistics, because I think this is something very, very important to make things quick and fast and precise. And very often this is missing. I think that integrating an art logistic expert from the beginning in the definition of an intervention plans for the protection of our cultural heritage, obviously together with the other parties involved, art historian, restorer, emergency response forces, insurance experts, would greatly benefit the results of the operation, which would be conducted in a more efficient and coordinated manner. Referring to the Italian situation, it seems to me, from my experience, that there is a lack in the definition and planning of emergency response plan for the artworks. Each region, town, museum should have one plan already elaborated with all the different professionals involved. Whenever we have been involved in an emergency operation in the past, it has always been without real planning. When you intervene in a disaster-stricken area to protect an artistic assets or cultural heritage, you should go there and already know what are the artworks or assets present in that area. And this is probably known. What are the priorities? Sometimes you are forced to choose because there is not all the time that you need to do everything. What are the handling difficulties and what equipment is needed? What kind of packaging is needed? If there are masterpieces, it should be very good if the packing is already there, ready, stored, close somewhere. And where the other very important information, where the artworks should be taken, if they can be transported, there should be already places where you know where you can go quickly. If the artworks cannot be transported, what kind of equipment or tools are needed to secure them in places? All of this should be known, as I said. Plans should be already exist. As other speakers have already said, digitally archived with unified data and parameters that can be easily acquired and interpreted by civil protection, firefighters, superintendencies, and technical intervention teams. And this is another, and my last point, there should be available professionally trained intervention teams. Volunteering offer an amazing job, but is it right that such important and risky activity are entrusted to teams of volunteers? In this situation, what I think, incredible levels of experience are acquired that should not be lost by changing teams all the time. So we need really professionals to intervene in this situation. And so I'm closing. It is necessary to be able to previously acquire all the fundamental data for the intervention in a digital format, ready and available to everybody needs that, and to prepare logistical solutions to secure the cultural heritage in the shortest possible time and with techniques that do not lead to damage. A country like Italy, I think, that with a unique cultural and artistic heritage should have this already. And just to close and finish, logistic is a science made up of calculation of times, volumes, weights, spaces, that added to the professional experience in art handling will bring the best results for the protection and cultural heritage risks, with the cooperation with all the other actors, with the other institutions involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Addari. I think your contribution was very important because it has stressed the importance of disaster planning and logistics, and particularly I think that it was important your mentioning the importance of experience, the importance of having a professional team and not to improvise this kind of intervention, because as you said, logistics is a science. So thank you again for your intervention. And let's turn now to UNESCO. Well, needless to say what UNESCO is, and let me introduce somebody who, again, wouldn't need any presentation. He's a dear friend, Edouard Planche, who is now head of culture unit of the UNESCO Regional Bureau for Science and Culture in Europe. And I understand he will be providing us a picture of the activity, of the action of UNESCO for culture in emergency. Edouard, you have the...
Thank you, Manlio. I hope you can all hear me. Buonasera a tutti. Good evening, dear friends and colleagues. I'm sorry it's already 6 and it's Friday evening, so I'm going to try to bring a little bit of fresh air to the possible extent. Let's share my screen. You can all see the screen. Is that fine with you? Yes? Okay, let me know if there's a problem because I don't see you anymore on my screen. Yes, I would like to give you some background on UNESCO's action for culture in emergencies and the new challenges we are facing. Background goes back to 20 years ago, actually, with this very shocking event which succeeded in... I'm also sorry to put my chronometer, which succeeded in Afghanistan with the destruction of the Buddha Banyan. Here is also another picture of the disaster on cultural heritage and population before everything. Here, if I'm not wrong, in Iraq, in Tombouctou, Mali, with the manuscripts from Tombouctou, which were from some of them destroyed or stolen, but the majority were kept safe thanks to an ancestral organization and the organization of the local population. Here again, propaganda we are facing now against cultural heritage and ideology going through social networks with the Islamists in Iraq, the disasters of the war and conflicts in Syria, all these horrible pictures we have all seen. So nowadays, what we are facing is a new situation. We have started to structure UNESCO's reply in 2015 by putting in place, with the approval of the UNESCO states members, of a strategy on culture in emergencies, to be able to put UNESCO and other sisters agencies on the first row when there is an emergency situation. So a need for a real policy set up and approved, a coordination mechanism, some funding, of course, and a rapid response mechanism in case of extreme urgency. The policy I was telling you has been approved in 2015. An emergency preparedness and response unit has been set with a number of colleagues who are part of what we call the culture and emergencies entity. So we are putting together all the activities and stuff related to the protection of cultural heritage, which within one single entity under the cover of the culture sector. Regarding the funding, an Heritage Emergency Fund has been also put in place, which can be used quite with a mechanism which is quite rapid. And a roster of experts on standby for deployment has been also set to speed the UNESCO's reply to the urgent situation. So very briefly, what is the scope of our work? The dimensions of culture are supported, as I'm sure you know, by several culture conventions. We have 6 within the culture sector dedicated to tangible cultural and natural heritage. I'm talking here about the 1954 The Hague Convention regarding protection of heritage in time of conflict, and the 1972 World Heritage Convention. But we are also tackling movable heritage and museum with the 1970 convention dedicated to a fight against illicit trafficking. And the water cultural heritage is also among our priorities since 2001. And then the intangible cultural heritage arrived with the 2003 convention, and finally the 2005 convention dedicated to the diversity of cultural expressions. So this is the framework under which we are all working and implementing our activities. As I was telling you, now we have inserted into this normative framework an emergency preparedness a new window and an emergency response through the structure I have just illustrated. But nowadays we are facing what I would call a dual emergencies, especially with the rising of the challenges of COVID-19. Since this outbreak of COVID-19, the world has kept witnessing a number of countries which were hit by a combination of devastating disasters or natural disasters or conflict and the health crisis. And such a combination that we could call dual emergencies have been seen in cases like the earthquake in Zagreb, which was mentioned earlier, the tropical cyclone Harold in Fiji, the Solomon Islands, in Tonga, Vanuatu, the floods in Yemen. All these events which have severely affected the heritage, but also in Haiti, and the devastating explosions in Beirut, which have affected 8,000 buildings, 640 historic ones. So the conflicts as well, they continue in a number of countries: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, to name a few, leaving many people behind and to live in this permanent uncertainty and fear. So indeed, disasters and conflict alike have not waited for the COVID-19 pandemic to pass, and UNESCO has continued to provide support and emergency assistance to a number of countries, including through the Heritage Emergency Fund I was mentioning. And our key interventions included provisions of technical guidance, capacity building, analysis of satellite imagery. But despite this continuous effort, however, the COVID-19 has further complicated our work, has increased the vulnerability of culture during emergencies, and now is hampering urgent responses and recovery efforts. So we have to go back to... we are facing two challenges, operational challenges, two kind of challenges, let's say, operational challenges and policy challenges. Among the operational challenges, I would like to mention in relation to the protection of culture in emergency, the travel restrictions, meaning the ability of UNESCO is hampered by these travel restrictions to coordinate and dispatch experts' mission to provide technical assistance to countries in the aftermath of an emergency situation. So emergency operation needs now to rely primarily on expertise that is national and local. Second operational challenge we are facing, it's national and local experts and personnel in the cultural sector in their capacity as first responders on the ground during emergency. They are now unable to effectively coordinate the necessary first aid interventions due to a lack of capacities and equipment to manage health-related risk. Third operational challenge related to this point is that most cultural sites and repositories, including in areas vulnerable to disasters, do not have emergency plans and protocols, and hence are not adequately prepared to respond. Fourth operational challenge, lack of institutional knowledge and experience in assessing the impact of health emergencies such as COVID-19. And in this regard, the post-disaster need assessment PDNA methodology is being advocated as a valuable methodology to assess the social and economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic at the national level. In this regard, UNESCO, through the Heritage Emergency Fund, is funding a social economic impact assessment of the pandemic in Latin America and the Caribbean region in particular. But there's still a need, however, to strengthen the capacity of national authorities and institutions in coordinating relevant assessment for culture, especially in the context of joint UN exercises, and to ensure that this culture is integrated in the post-COVID-19 recovery processes. Fifth challenge, the lack of surveillance of sites and museums, which has increased the risk of looting and thefts. And sixth operational challenge I would like to mention, it's the physical distancing, which prevents communities from exercising their tangible heritage practices or expressing their creativity, which normally has a positive role to play for psychosocial healing, especially during and after disasters and conflict. Let me now mention some policy challenges. While policy documents, tools provide frameworks, these policies and framework do not include any specific provision addressing health-related emergencies and consequently situations of dual emergencies. While we have been at UNESCO successful since the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic in responding to a number of emergencies, today, our collective ability to provide relevant policy guidance and technical assistance to affected countries in an effective and timely manner is hampered. In this regard, there is also the need for the culture sector at all levels to engage with relevant partners and stakeholders in public health, including the World Health Organization and relevant national authorities such as ministries of health and such as ministries of health. Now, I would like to mention some priority areas of action now that I have said these operational and policy challenges we are facing. To build on the above reflection and Manlio that I have to conclude very briefly on the key policy and operational challenges we are facing about the COVID-19 pandemic. There is a clear need to strengthen emergency preparedness and response for culture in situation of what I have called dual emergencies through the following: coordination, capacities, and tools. Coordination, meaning establishment of new and effective coordination mechanisms. We need all stakeholders involved in saving cultures from conflict and disaster to rethink the way they intervene in emergency situations during a pandemic. There is now a clear need to strengthen coordination between the sectors for culture, emergency operations, and health, both at policy and operational levels. Second priority area in terms of capacities, meaning the strengthening of capacities of relevant national authorities and institutions. And in order for emergency operations for culture to be effective and safe, the capacity of those involved in safeguarding culture during emergencies need to be strengthened by incorporating the concern of public health into their operations. This should be done in cooperation with public health institutions and professionals, including the World Health Organization. Third priority areas of action, the tools, meaning the development of new tools or the strengthening of existing tools, such as the roster and guidelines, which need to be adapted, strengthened, developed to incorporate, once again, the concern of public health and safety during pandemics. Such tools will be useful in strengthening capacities of relevant national authorities and institutions. An example of partnership being strengthened during the course of 2020 includes the partnership of UNESCO with UNOSAT to obtain analysis of satellite imagery to monitor the impact of tropical cyclone Harold on heritage sites and buildings in the Pacific Islands, since the dispatch of missions was impossible due to the sanitary crisis. I stop there, and I thank you very much for your attention. I hope, Manlio, I haven't been too long. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Edouard. Thank you very much for your presentation and for stressing the necessity of strengthening coordination between national authorities, institutions, and international organizations, and for describing so clearly the role of UNESCO. Now, I think it's the turn of Alessio Re, who is the Secretary General of the Fondazione Sant'Agata per l'Economia della Cultura, and who is also one of the main pillars of the International Master in Cultural Property Protection in Crisis Response. And I think he will briefly illustrate a new initiative of the Foundation. Unless you have the floor.
Thank you. Let me try to share my screen in a second. Big problem. I just wanted to share a picture, but I'm gonna my speech will be very short. I just would like to say that I'm very pleased to see you all and to share with you this occasion. Also because we are in touch, we are connected to the Cultural Property Protection Master. I mean, most of you are involved in it, and so it's good to see and share this occasion as well with you all. We have talked about many operational and technical aspects which are fundamental in this work, but let me spend a few words on a new initiative, as you said, that we promoted together with the Sant'Agata Foundation and a number of friends and friend institutions, and we just launched in the past days. And Yara Moualla is going to present it much better and in detail than me. It is an initiative about Syria, a place a country which has an extraordinary history and cultural meaning, which is sadly affected by almost 10 years of war and destruction. And apparently it is far from us, but our team it feels very close to it because Walter Sant'Agata, the founder of this team, was working. One of his first work was in Syria on the citadel of Damascus, and to Syria he entitled the Ebla Center, which is the nucleus, the first nucleus of our group. And I'd like to mention an episode recently occurred in March when, during the boom of the sanitary emergency affecting at that time Italy, only Italy mainly, I got a picture that Yara is going to show, and it was a picture from a friend. It was taken in Aleppo, showing solidarity to our country, the facade of a church with the Italian flag. And I said to my friend, I saw many pictures like that from all over the world, because we all remember, we were receiving these signs of solidarity. But the reply was, Aleppo is special. It's not like the world. So I was thinking, I started in that moment thinking on the generosity of those people, having been living in a war for years and years and still ready to show solidarity. Culture and heritage is a matter of, it's a human right before all the technicalities and the other implications. So this project, it's quite hard to call it project. It's an initiative, and the title of it is Heritage Beyond Walls, and not by chance we choose the word beyond. We consider it much more than a project. It's probably a matter of hurt and of justice. It's about doing something right, really beyond the walls, meaning beyond the stones, the craziness of the world, beyond the emergency, possibly to a better future that hopefully will happen soon. So it's a project about people before than heritage. And the future, and there won't be war in the future that we want. Of course, it's a little thing. Don't take me too much naive. It's a first step, but we really aim to do many other little steps together with our friends and supporter, and possibly with the help of all of you. Before giving the floor to Yara to explain what it is about, a more personal note, if I may. This project is dedicated to two persons that were very important to me, and of course were connected to Syria, and who I miss a lot. Yara, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, just let me introduce Yara Moualla, who is an archaeologist, basically, of the University of the West Scotland, and she will complete, I understand, the intervention of Alessio.
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Hello. Good evening, everyone. I was having a problem. See who's gonna unmute me or the moderator. Thank you very much, and I'm very, very pleased to be here today to share with you this outstanding initiative. It was led by the Fondazione Sant'Agata, and I'm very honored to have the chance to help and build a bridge with the Syrian students and the Syrian speakers, or whoever related to the Syrian experience. So let's share the screen and go immediately to the presentation. Oops. Now, no, hold on a sec. Still. I'm not sure. I think you are not seeing the screen as yet somehow. We thought it worked in the test. That's good. So share. Okay, then, if it appears, I will start then by showing it and presenting it. Sorry for the confusion, but the platform is for me the first time I'm using it. So basically, as Alessio said, we named this initiative Heritage Beyond Walls, and we will present it now together. Apparently, this is the picture of the Aleppo church reflecting the flag of Italy on solidarity with the Italians during the last epidemic that attacked Italy the most. And yeah. So let's go now immediately to the program or thing. What is very important and vital is to remember that Heritage Beyond Walls is offered to university students in a country that is suffering of 10 years, almost 10 years of armed conflict, displacement, migration, and isolation due to so many factors, as well as this extraordinary circumstances led to the loss in so many levels in cultural capital and social capital destruction, including the destruction and looting of so many archaeological sites and the loss of intangible cultural heritage, means, and bearers. Not to forget also that there is a huge rupture in the human capital, as many people immigrated and who managed to stay in the country is somehow facing isolation, no access to knowledge resources, and they are not being able to participate in the international discourse about important topics related to heritage management. While there are the ones who needed this the most, to mobilize the huge potential of cultural heritage to participate in the economic recovery and to social empowerment. Therefore, if we don't act now, we will not only risk our present, but also limiting our future possibilities. Let's talk about the Heritage Beyond Walls as a project. I mean, as I said, it's offered to Syrian university students in cultural heritage-related disciplinaries with the aim to contribute to improve access to knowledge, break isolation, encourage sharing and discussion, and generate capacities for making cultural heritage a resource in the recovering processes. The project contains two phases, basically. The first one is the talks, and the second one is the challenge. And I will start with the talks. Basically, we will have 5 topics and 10 talks in general. They will be discussing topics regarding heritage, people, and capital, and how to create value and make change, mobilizing heritage in this regard. The idea is to create the notion of dialogue, whether it's the dialogue between the international knowledge that meets the local experts, as you will see with the names of the presenters, as well as we are giving the students a place and a voice in the international discourse, as the sessions are designed to be interactive and to engage with the students as much as possible. As you can see here, we have the 5 topics: culture as capital, and then you have the historic cities, restoration and beyond, public archaeology, and then art and people. And in each session, we try always to combine the international knowledge, and then we will have a voice coming from the local expertise, or people who had a kind of hand-on in Syria, or projects related to Syrians in the country or in diaspora, to see how we can manage heritage for the benefit of the people in all the sessions. So basically, we have, of course, Alessio, and we have Mahmoud Ramadan, who will be talking, both of them, about culture as capital, but each one from a different perspective. The same thing for the historic cities. You will have Francesco Penderin and Ali Ismail. Again, we will have the international voice together with an expert, an experience, or an expert from Syria, to see how, like, as example, they have managed to restore and to work in the rehabilitation of old Aleppo, and that they won also lately the ICCROM prize, the special prize there. The same thing, I'm also very, very happy to have Sara Abram with us today, especially that she is also one of our speakers. And also the Centro Conservazione is one of our partners. They will be talking about the restoration and beyond, and then there will be Yara and Yasser Jabi, who will be talking about how to engage with the students in the restoration and in the documentation in preparation for the restoration. For the public archaeology, it will be Paolo Del Vesco from the Museo Jigysu di Torino, together with Giorgio Poccellati and me, because we're like, from one side you will hear it from an expert in Italy, and from the other side you will hear it from an archaeological mission that worked in Syria for years before the war, and how much that adapting public archaeology managed to safeguard and also not only the archaeological site, but also the community there, to keep them inclusive and working together in harmony. Then we will have Paolo Naldici from the Città dell'Arte in Italy, and then Yasser El-Ma'moun, who will be talking about the Multica project, which is a project done by the museums in Berlin to train the Syrian refugees to become kind of interpreters and touristic guides of heritage, whether of their own heritage in the Islamic Museum or of the German heritage. And it's an extremely interesting initiative done, and to see how people in motion can react in heritage, and how much heritage can combine and participate in the integration processes. The challenge, so basically, as I said, after the talks, there will be all the students will be expected to write a short paper of 2,500 words about a project idea on how to mobilize cultural heritage sites, elements, expressions in Syria. And there will be a pool of resources and further readings to help them reshape that kind of a paper. Then there will be a kind of a selection jury or a selection committee in order to nominate the best 3 papers, and all of them they will have the chance to publish in Kermes journal and Art. And then the first will gain also 500 euros, and the second will have the 300 euros, and the third will have 200 euros. And all participants will have the participation certificate in a graduation or in an award ceremony in the 24th of May 2020. Our program is, as I said, is led by the Fondazione Sant'Agata, but in collaboration with different, as we see, thanks to all of them, different organizations and heritage-led bodies in Italy, including the 2 journals that will publicize our 3 winners, the paper of the 3 winners, and the Rome Museum exhibition that is hosting us as well today. I would say now the way forward, and what is very important to think of, that we are only starting, and we consider Heritage Beyond Walls, as Alessio says, is a bit far from a complete project. It's rather an initiative, but what is important about it, that it's a starting point. We are learning a lot at this moment on how to engage with the students during the conflict, in the place of the conflict, and to see how much we can mobilize the power of heritage to connect people and to empower them to know how to manage their resources, specifically their cultural resources, for a better future, of course, and to make heritage a venue always for people to meet and celebrate life. I would like to thank you very much for having the attention to listen to me, and thank you again.
I hope you can hear me. Okay, so thank you, Yara, for your final. Sorry, we had a problem of connection. I wasn't present anymore, unfortunately. I'm afraid we have run out of time, so I don't think we have time for question and answers. So this being the situation, I think that we have a lot of takeaways from this very interesting panel. We heard of very different voices, different skills, different experiences in the capacity building for risk management of cultural heritage. I think that there are some keywords that maybe we will hopefully remember. So let me thank once again Rome Museum Exhibition for hosting this roundtable. The organizers of the Fondazione Sant'Agata and the International Master. And let me, of course, be very, very thankful to our speakers and to the institutions they represent. And thanks to the audience that had the patience to listen to us. So in these difficult times, I hope we'll have a very nice weekend. And thanks everybody for being here with us. Have a nice evening.